had been driving for hours. The road stretched ahead, endless and empty, cutting through thick forests that swallowed the last bit of daylight. I checked the GPS again, but the signal was long gone. My phone had been nothing but a useless brick for the past 20 miles. The only thing I had left was the printed directions my friend, Mark, had given me. The cabin was supposed to be secluded, perfect for a weekend of peace, he had said. No distractions, no noise, just you and nature, Mark had promised. That had sounded good at the time. But now, lost in the dark, with only the hum of my car engine for company, it didn't feel so perfect. I slowed the car as I reached an unmarked dirt road, barely visible between two towering pines. I pulled out the directions. Turn left at the old wooden fence, then follow the dirt road for about 3 miles. The cabin will be on the right. The old fence was there, half collapsed and covered in moss. This had to be the turn. I eased onto the dirt path, the crunch of gravel beneath my tires the only sound around me. My headlights barely cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but trees and more trees. I drove slow, careful to avoid the larger potholes, the road barely wide enough for my car. After what felt like forever, I finally saw it. A small wooden cabin, just where Mark said it would be. It looked old but sturdy, sitting in a small clearing surrounded by nothing but trees. A single porch light was on, flickering slightly, and the windows were dark. I parked and stepped out, stretching my legs. The air was crisp, the scent of damp earth and pine filling my lungs. It was quiet, almost too quiet. No wind, no rustling leaves, no distant animal sounds, just silence. I shook it off, grabbed my bag, and made my way up the porch steps. The key was under the mat, just as Mark had told me. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. Inside, it smelled of old wood and dust, like it hadn't been used in months. I flicked the light switch, and a dim yellow glow filled the small space. The cabin was simple. One main room with a fireplace, a small kitchen, and a door leading to what I assumed was the bedroom. The furniture was old but functional. I set my bag down and checked my phone again. Still no signal. I sighed. Mark had mentioned there was a landline, so I searched for it, eventually spotting the dusty rotary phone on a small wooden table near the couch. I picked up the receiver and listened. Nothing, not even a dial tone. Great. No cell service and no landline. If anything happened, I was on my own. I shook off the unease creeping up my spine and focused on getting settled. I unpacked a bit, grabbed a bottle of water from my bag, and took a seat by the fireplace. The silence was thick. No hum of appliances, no distant sounds of cars or people. Just the crackle of wood as I lit a small fire to warm up the cabin. Hours passed. I read a book, made myself a quick dinner with the canned food I had brought, and decided to turn in early. The drive had drained me, and the darkness outside was unsettling. The wind had picked up slightly, rustling the trees, but beyond that, the night was still. I checked the locks on the door and windows, making sure everything was secure before heading to the bedroom. The bed was stiff, the blankets musty, but I was too tired to care. I crawled in, pulled the covers up to my chin, and closed my eyes. Then I heard it, a soft creak, somewhere outside. I held my breath, listening. Another creak, like footsteps on the wooden porch. My heart pounded in my chest. I told myself it was the wind, maybe a branch shifting. But then came another sound, a soft, deliberate knock on the front door. I sat up, blood turning to ice. Who the hell would be knocking at this hour? I grabbed my phone, but of course it was useless. My mind raced through possibilities. Mark? No, he had no reason to come out here. A lost hiker? Unlikely. I stayed still, waiting. The knock came again, louder this time. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then silence. I waited, straining my ears for any sound, but nothing followed. Minutes passed, dragging on like hours. I didn't dare move. Finally, I convinced myself that whoever it was must have left. I lay back down, forcing my body to relax. Then, just as I was drifting off, a soft creak inside the cabin. My blood ran cold. Someone was inside. I didn't move, didn't make a sound. My mind screamed at me to get up, to run, but my body was frozen. Another creak, closer this time. I had locked the door. I was sure of it, but someone had gotten in. I slowly reached for the flashlight on the nightstand, my hand trembling. I flicked it on and aimed it toward the bedroom doorway. Nothing, but I could feel it. That sense that someone else was there, just beyond the light, watching. I gripped the flashlight tighter and forced myself to move. I had to check, had to be sure. I slid out of bed as quietly as I could, my bare feet barely making a sound on the wooden floor. I inched toward the door and peeked into the main room. Empty. I swallowed hard. The front door was still shut, the lock still in place. The windows were intact, but something felt wrong. Then I noticed it. My bag. It was open. I hadn't left it like that. The zipper was undone, my things slightly shifted. Someone had gone through it. Panic surged through me. I scanned the room again, my flashlight beam shaking. No sign of anyone, but I knew someone had been here, and maybe they still were. I moved quickly, checking every corner, the bathroom, under the bed. Nothing. No one. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the corner of the room, flashlight in one hand, the heaviest object I could find in the other. I waited for morning. When the first light of dawn broke through the trees, I grabbed my keys and my bag and got the hell out of there. As I pulled away, I glanced once more at the cabin in my rearview mirror. That's when I saw it. The front door, slightly open. I had locked it. I knew I had. I didn't stop driving until I was back in town, my hands still shaking on the wheel. I never told Mark exactly what happened, just that I had cut the trip short. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't alone in that cabin, and whoever had been there, they had been inside with me the whole time. I never should have gone up to that cabin alone. I knew better, but I convinced myself it would be fine. A weekend of peace and quiet, away from the noise of the city. No emails, no phone calls, no people. Just me, the trees, and the sound of the wind through the branches. The drive up was uneventful. Long, winding roads cutting through thick forest. The trees seemed to press in the farther I drove, their bare branches reaching over the road like skeletal fingers. It was late fall, and most of the leaves had already fallen, leaving the woods looking dead and empty. The sun hung low in the sky by the time I reached the cabin. It wasn't much. A small, one-room structure with a loft for sleeping. The wood was old, weathered to a grayish brown. The front porch sagged slightly, but it was sturdy enough. The windows were dusty, and when I opened the door, the stale air inside told me no one had been here in a long time. I set my bag down on the floor and looked around. A wood stove sat in the corner, a stack of logs beside it. A small kitchen area with an old gas stove and a sink. The cabinets held a few canned goods left behind by the last visitor. A small table with 2 chairs, a couch against the wall. The stairs to the loft were little more than a wooden ladder, leading up to a mattress on the floor. Simple, but it would do. The first night was quiet, too quiet. I was used to the distant hum of traffic, the occasional siren, the murmur of voices through apartment walls. Out here there was nothing, just the wind and the creaking of the old cabin as it settled in the cold. I woke up in the middle of the night to a sound. Something outside, a rustling, then a soft crunch of leaves. I held my breath, listening. Probably just an animal. A deer, maybe, or a raccoon. I rolled over, telling myself it was nothing, but I didn't sleep well after that. The next morning, I found tracks in the dirt around the cabin. Not hoof prints, not paws, footprints, barefoot, human. They circled the cabin, pausing beneath the windows. My stomach dropped. Someone had been out there watching me. I told myself it was just some hiker, someone passing through. But that didn't explain why they were barefoot, why they had stood so still beneath my window in the freezing night air. I shook off the unease and spent the day chopping wood and hiking. The air was crisp, the silence thick. I tried to enjoy it, but every time I looked at the trees, I felt like I was being watched. That night, I locked the door and propped a chair against it, just in case. The wind had picked up, making the trees groan. I tried to sleep, but I kept waking up, sure I had heard something. Then, around 3 in the morning, I heard it again. A soft, deliberate rustling. Then, the sound of the doorknob rattling. Someone was trying to get in. I sat up, heart pounding. The chair against the door shifted slightly, but held. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. After what felt like hours, the rattling stopped. Then, the slow crunch of footsteps moving away. I waited until dawn before I moved. When I finally worked up the courage to look outside, there were more footprints. They led from the trees to my door, then back into the woods. I packed my things. Fast. I didn't care how much I had paid for the weekend. I wasn't staying another night. I threw my bag in the car, turned the key, and listened as the engine sputtered but wouldn't start. I tried again. Nothing. Panic rose in my chest. I popped the hood, but I had no idea what I was looking at. Everything seemed fine. The battery wasn't dead. The gas tank was full. There was no reason it shouldn't start. Then I saw it. The wires beneath the hood had been cut. My stomach turned. Someone had done this while I slept. Someone had walked right up to my car, popped the hood, and made sure I couldn't leave. I grabbed my bag and ran. There was an old ranger station about 5 miles down the road. If I could just get there, I could call for help. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I just ran. The woods were silent. Too silent.
No birds.
No animals. Just the sound of my footsteps and my ragged breathing. I kept moving, my legs burning, my breath coming in gasps. Then, ahead of me, I saw movement, a figure, standing in the middle of the road. I stopped. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. The figure didn't move. It was just standing there, barefoot, facing me. I turned and ran into the trees. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get away. Branches slapped against my face, tore at my clothes. I tripped, fell, scrambled back to my feet. I ran until my lungs felt like they would burst. Then I saw it, the roof of the ranger station through the trees. I stumbled toward it, my legs barely holding me up. The door was unlocked. I slammed it behind me, locking it, bolting it. The station was empty, but there was a radio. My hands shook as I grabbed it, turning the dial, trying to find a signal. Static. Then a voice. I gasped, trying to speak, but my throat was too dry. Then, a noise behind me, a soft creak. I turned slowly. The back door was open. I had locked it. I was sure I had locked it. The radio crackled. The voice on the other end was asking if I was there, if I needed help. I opened my mouth to speak, but I didn't get the chance. The last thing I remember was movement, a shadow, a hand grabbing my wrist, and then nothing. I woke up in a hospital 2 days later. Hikers had found me unconscious near the ranger station. The police said I must have fallen, hit my head. Maybe I had been sleepwalking. Maybe I was confused. But they didn't find any footprints. They didn't find any signs of someone else being there. No one believed me, but I know what I saw, And I know that whoever was out there, they didn't want me to leave, and they almost got what they wanted. I never planned on spending the night in that cabin. It was supposed to be a quick stop, just a place to rest before I finished my long drive. I had been on the road for hours, my eyes burning from staring at the endless stretch of highway. When I saw the turnoff for a small roadside inn, I thought I'd finally found a place to sleep. But when I pulled into the lot, I saw the no vacancy sign glowing red in the dark. I sighed, rubbing my eyes. The only other option was to keep driving, but I was too exhausted. My phone's GPS showed a smaller road leading into the woods, where a few cabins were marked on the map. Some kind of rental property, maybe. I figured I could find an empty one, leave cash, and explain later. It was a bad idea, but at that point, I didn't care. The road leading to the cabins was narrow, rough, and barely visible under the beams of my headlights. Trees crowded the edges, their branches clawing at the sky. The deeper I went, the more the road seemed to disappear, but eventually, I spotted a single wooden cabin sitting in a small clearing. It looked old but sturdy, with a small porch and a woodpile stacked neatly against the side. There were no lights, no cars, nothing to suggest anyone was there. I pulled up, killed the engine, and stepped out. The air was thick with the smell of damp wood and earth. I knocked on the door, waited. Nothing. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. I tried the handle, it was unlocked. The door creaked as I pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit interior. A fireplace sat cold against one wall, a small kitchen area on the other. There was a table, a few chairs, and a single bed pushed against the far wall. Everything was covered in a fine layer of dust, like no one had been there in a long time. I hesitated, but my exhaustion made the decision for me. I shut the door behind me and locked it. I'd leave early, first light, before anyone showed up. For now, I just needed sleep. I dropped my bag near the bed and sat down, testing the mattress. It was stiff, but at that moment it felt like heaven. I pulled off my shoes, lay back, and stared at the wooden ceiling. The cabin was silent, except for the occasional creak from the wood settling. I closed my eyes, and then I heard it, a faint rustling outside. I sat up, heart pounding. Maybe it was just the wind in the trees. But then it came again, this time closer. A deliberate sound, not random like the wind. Footsteps, slow, careful, moving just beyond the walls of the cabin. I held my breath, straining to listen. The footsteps stopped. Silence stretched out, long and unnatural. I told myself it was just an animal, maybe a deer, but something in my gut told me otherwise. I swung my legs off the bed, moving as quietly as possible. I reached for my bag, where I had a small pocket knife. Hardly a weapon, but it was better than nothing. The footsteps started again, this time circling toward the back of the cabin. My pulse hammered in my ears. I crept toward the window, careful not to step too loudly. The glass was dirty, but I could just make out the trees, their dark forms shifting in the wind. And then I saw it, a figure standing just beyond the tree line. It was too dark to make out details, but I could see the shape of a person, unmoving, just watching. A bolt of fear shot through me. My first instinct was to grab my keys and bolt for the car, but then I remembered I hadn't left the keys on the nightstand like I usually did. They were still in my jacket, which I'd tossed over the chair on the far side of the room. If I ran now, I'd have to cross the entire cabin to get them, and that meant turning my back to the door. I stayed frozen by the window, my breath shallow. The figure hadn't moved, and then, so slowly I almost didn't catch it, it tilted its head. I swallowed hard. Then it stepped forward, not toward the cabin, but sideways, moving in a slow, deliberate arc around the clearing. It was like it was testing the space, deciding. I backed away from the window, pulse racing. I needed to get out. Now, I moved quickly, grabbing my jacket and fishing for my keys. My hands were shaking, and I nearly dropped them. I forced myself to breathe. Then I heard the door handle move. A slow testing turn. The lock held, but I wasn't going to wait to see if that stopped whoever was out there. I sprinted for the back door, small, half-rotted, barely hanging on its hinges. I shoved it open and ran. The forest swallowed me immediately. Branches scratched at my arms and face as I tore through the underbrush. My breath came in gasps, but I didn't stop. Couldn't. Behind me, I heard the crash of movement, heavy footsteps. Faster now. I ran blindly, barely able to see. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed to get away. Then, suddenly, the trees thinned, and I burst onto the gravel road. My car was still there, the driver's side door wide open. I lunged inside, hands fumbling to start the engine. My headlights flared to life, illuminating the space behind me. The clearing, the cabin, and nothing else. No figure, no movement, just empty trees swaying in the wind. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and tore out of there, gravel spraying beneath my tires. I didn't slow down, didn't look back until I was miles down the highway, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. I don't know who or what was out there that night. Maybe just some drifter lurking in the woods. Maybe something worse. All I know is that I never should have stopped. I don't know why I thought renting a cabin in the middle of nowhere was a good idea. Maybe I wanted a break from the noise of the city, the constant buzz of people, sirens, and car horns. Maybe I just needed space to breathe. I told myself I'd be fine alone for a week. I was wrong. The cabin was deep in the woods, at least 30 miles from the nearest town. I had stocked up on groceries before heading out. I had my phone, but there was no signal. That was expected. The owner had warned me about that. The cabin did have electricity, but no Wi-Fi. Just me, the trees, and silence. The first night was fine. A little too quiet, maybe. I wasn't used to that. I lay in bed, staring at the wooden ceiling, listening to the faint sound of the wind through the trees. It took me a while to fall asleep, but when I did, I slept deeply. The second night, I started hearing noises. It sounded like something moving outside, just beyond the cabin walls. It was probably an animal, deer maybe, or a raccoon looking for food. I told myself that and went back to bed, though it took longer for sleep to come. By the third night, the sounds were louder, more distinct. Footsteps, not the quick, light scurrying of an animal, but slow, deliberate steps. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. I listened, waiting for the sound to come again. When it did, I grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand and shined it toward the window. Nothing, just trees stretching into the darkness. I forced myself to relax. I was letting my imagination get to me. The isolation, the darkness, the silence, it was playing tricks on me. I reminded myself that I had locked the door. I double-checked just to be sure. It was locked tight. I went back to bed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. On the fourth day, I found footprints in the dirt outside the cabin. Human footprints. They led from the trees to the window near my bed and then back into the woods. My stomach twisted. I hadn't seen another person since I arrived. There was no reason for anyone to be out here. No reason for someone to be standing by my window in the middle of the night. I tried to stay calm. Maybe it was a hiker who got lost. Maybe they were just passing through. But why would they come right up to my cabin and just stand there? I shook off the thought and spent the rest of the day trying to distract myself. Reading, hiking a little, making dinner. But the feeling of being watched never left me. That night, I barely slept. I kept the flashlight in my hand, my ears straining for any sound. Around 2 a.m., I heard it again. Footsteps, closer this time. They stopped right outside the door. I held my breath, my heart hammering in my chest. Then the doorknob rattled. I shot out of bed, grabbing the heavy flashlight like a weapon. The knob twisted again, harder this time. I knew I had locked it. I had checked it 3 times before going to bed. The door held. After what felt like an eternity, the rattling stopped. The footsteps moved away, back into the woods. I didn't sleep at all after that. In the morning, I went outside. More footprints. They circled the cabin. My skin crawled. I needed to leave. I packed up my things, threw everything into my truck, and tried to start it. Nothing. The engine wouldn't turn over. I checked under the hood, though I barely knew what I was looking for. The battery was there. The fuel lines were intact. I got back in, turned the key again. Silence. My stomach dropped. It had worked fine yesterday. Someone must have tampered with it. I was trapped. I went back inside, locking the door behind me. I needed to think. I had food and water for a few more days. Maybe a passing car would come by. Maybe I could fix the truck. Maybe a sound cut through the silence. A low scraping noise. It was coming from the side of the cabin, near the bedroom window. My blood turned to ice. I crept toward the window, moving slowly, trying not to make a sound. My breath caught in my throat. There, just outside the glass, was a man. His face was partially obscured by the reflection, but I could see enough. His skin was pale, his hair tangled and unkempt. His eyes, dark and hollow, were staring right at me. His lips curled into a slow, unnatural smile. I stumbled backward, my heart slamming against my ribs. He didn't move. He just stood there, watching me. Then he lifted his hand and dragged something across the glass. A knife. I ran to the door, making sure it was still locked. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a cast iron skillet, and braced myself. The scraping continued, slow and deliberate. Then, a whisper, barely audible through the thick glass. "I see you." I don't remember much after that. My body went into autopilot. I grabbed a chair and jammed it under the door handle. I found a hammer and kept it in my lap. I sat there, shaking, waiting for the sun to come up. By morning, he was gone. The footprints were still there. The knife marks on the window were real, but he was gone. I didn't waste time. I took the emergency flare from the cabinet and fired it into the sky, hoping anyone would see it. Hours passed. Then, finally, a truck appeared down the dirt road. A ranger. He saw my distress, heard my story, and took me back to town. I left my truck behind. I didn't care. I never found out who that man was or what he wanted. The police searched the area but found nothing. No footprints, no evidence. Like he had never been there. But I knew the truth. He had been there, and he had been watching me the whole time. I had always liked being alone. It wasn't that I hated people, but the silence of solitude was something I had grown to appreciate. So when I found a listing for an old cabin deep in the woods, miles from the nearest town, it seemed perfect. The cabin was small but sturdy, built decades ago by someone who had clearly wanted to live off the grid. It had everything I needed: a wood-burning stove, a small but functional kitchen, and a bedroom tucked away in the back. There was no electricity, no running water, just an old well outside and a fireplace that looked like it had been used recently. I didn't mind the lack of modern conveniences. In fact, that was part of the appeal. I wanted to disconnect for a while, get away from the noise of the world. The first few days were peaceful. I spent my time chopping wood, reading old books I had brought along, and taking long walks through the woods. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and damp earth. I hadn't seen another person since I arrived, and that suited me just fine. But on the fourth night, something changed. I was sitting by the fire, sipping on a cup of instant coffee, when I heard something outside. At first, I thought it was just the wind, branches creaking, leaves rustling, but then I heard it again. A steady, deliberate crunching of footsteps on the gravel path that led up to the cabin. I put my cup down and listened. The sound stopped. I waited, staring at the door, my heart beating a little faster than before. Could have been an animal, I told myself. A deer, maybe, but something about the rhythm of the steps felt human. I stood up, walked to the window, and peered out into the darkness. The forest was pitch black beyond the reach of my firelight. I saw nothing. I told myself I was overreacting, but I still locked the door before going to bed that night. The next morning, I checked around the cabin. There were footprints. Not boots, not paws. Bare feet. The prints led from the edge of the trees to my porch and then back into the woods. My stomach tightened. It had been below freezing that night. No one would be walking around barefoot. I tried to shake it off. Maybe someone had gotten lost, wandered too close to my cabin, and then left when they realized it was occupied. That seemed logical, but the thought of those footprints stayed with me all day. That night, I made sure the door was locked. I even barricaded it with a chair, just in case. The fire crackled softly as I sat in my chair, my rifle leaning against the wall beside me. I told myself I was being paranoid, but the silence outside felt different, heavier. Around midnight, I heard it again. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling the cabin. I stayed still, barely breathing. The steps stopped right outside the front door. I gripped my rifle, heart pounding. Then a soft tap. Not knocking, just tapping. Fingertips against the wood. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just waited. Minutes passed. The tapping stopped. Then the footsteps moved away, fading into the woods. I barely slept that night. When morning came, I stepped outside, rifle in hand. More footprints. They circled the cabin. Whoever it was had been out there for a long time, watching. I made a decision. I was going to leave. Whatever was out there, I didn't want to find out. I packed my things quickly, stuffing everything I could into my bag. I planned to hike back to my truck, drive away, and never look back. But as I slung my bag over my shoulder, I noticed something on the porch. A single, perfect handprint. Too large to be a child's, too small for a man's. Just wrong. I didn't waste another second. I started walking fast, my rifle at my side. The woods were eerily silent, the way they get when something is wrong. No birds, no wind, just the crunch of my boots on the frozen ground. Then, ahead of me, I saw something, a figure half hidden behind a tree, pale, thin, standing still, watching me. I didn't hesitate. I raised my rifle, aimed, but when I blinked, the figure was gone. I ran. I didn't care about the noise, didn't care if I tripped or fell. I just ran. My truck was parked about a mile away, but it felt like forever. The entire time, I felt eyes on me. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. When I finally reached my truck, I fumbled with the keys, hands shaking. I jumped in, slammed the door, and locked it. I turned the key. The engine roared to life. Relief flooded through me, but then I saw it. In the rearview mirror, a figure standing at the edge of the trees, watching. I tore out of there, speeding down the dirt road without looking back. I never went back to that cabin. I never told anyone what happened, because I knew they wouldn't believe me. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I think about those footsteps, the tapping, the handprint, and I wonder if somewhere out there in those woods, something is still watching, waiting. I don't know why I thought spending a weekend alone in a cabin was a good idea. I guess I wanted to get away from the noise, the stress of work, the endless notifications on my phone. I imagined something peaceful, reading by the fireplace, taking long walks in the woods, maybe even writing a little. I didn't expect to spend 3 nights in a place that made me question reality. The cabin was deep in the woods, miles from the nearest town. It was small, just one main room with a fireplace, a tiny kitchen, and a single bedroom with a bathroom attached. The owner had left the key under a loose rock on the porch, just as they'd said in the email. I should have known something was off the moment I stepped inside. It smelled like damp wood and something faintly sour. I brushed it off, probably just stale air from being shut up for weeks. I set my bags down, checked my phone, no service. That was expected. I had brought books, a few downloaded movies, and enough food to last me the weekend. The first few hours were peaceful. I made myself some coffee, sat by the window, and watched the trees sway. The silence was almost too deep, but I told myself that was the point.
No distractions.
That first night, I barely slept. The wind outside howled like something alive, rattling the windows and groaning against the walls. I kept hearing small sounds, creaks, soft thuds, maybe just the cabin settling, maybe animals outside. But there was something else. A tapping sound, rhythmic and light, like fingernails against wood. I got up twice to check the front porch. Nothing there. The second day was uneventful. I hiked a little, sticking to the paths near the cabin. The forest was thick, the trees pressing close together, their branches clawing at the sky. The whole place felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. Too quiet. No birds, no rustling in the underbrush. Just the wind and my own footsteps. I walked for an hour before turning back, uneasy for no reason I could pinpoint. That night, the tapping came again. Louder, more insistent. I checked every window, every door. Still nothing. I barely slept, jerking awake at every little noise. At some point, I thought I heard breathing just outside the bedroom door, deep and steady. I held my breath, straining to listen. The air felt thick, pressing down on me. I didn't move until dawn. On the third day, I decided to leave early. Something was wrong with the place. It wasn't paranoia, it was instinct. But when I went outside to load up my car, my keys were gone. I tore through my bags, checked every surface in the cabin. Nothing. I knew I had put them on the kitchen counter the night before. They weren't there now. I told myself I must have dropped them outside, maybe when I first arrived. I spent hours searching. I combed through the dirt around the cabin, retraced my steps from my hike, checked under the porch. Nothing. By mid-afternoon, I was sweating despite the cold. The sun was starting to dip lower, and the thought of spending another night made my skin crawl. I even considered walking back to town, but I had no signal, no map, and no idea which direction the road was from here. I hadn't paid attention when I drove in. That evening, I forced myself to eat, even though I wasn't hungry. I tried to stay calm. I went over every possibility. Maybe an animal took the keys. Maybe I misplaced them. Maybe I was just tired and overlooking something obvious. I told myself that over and over, trying to force it into belief. Then, just after sunset, I heard it again. The tapping. But this time, it wasn't at the window. It was on the front door. I froze, breath caught in my throat. It was deliberate, precise. 3 slow taps, a pause, 3 more. My body went cold. I didn't move. I just sat there, staring at the door. The only light in the cabin was the glow from the fireplace. Shadows flickered, stretching and shifting. The tapping came again, and then the doorknob rattled. I grabbed the fire poker without thinking, gripping it so tight my knuckles ached. I wanted to move, to check the door, to do something, but I couldn't. I just sat there, every muscle locked. The doorknob rattled again. Then silence. I stayed like that for hours. The fire burned low. The room grew colder. I listened. The wind outside had stopped. The world felt too still. At some point, exhaustion won. I must have dozed off, because when I woke up, the sun was rising, casting pale light through the windows. For a moment, I almost convinced myself I had imagined everything. Then I saw the front door. It was open, just a crack, wide enough to see the darkness beyond, wide enough for something to have come inside. I didn't move at first. I just stared. The door had been locked. I was sure of it. I forced myself to stand, every nerve in my body screaming. I walked to the door, slow and careful, and nudged it open with the poker. The porch was empty. The trees stood silent. But there, on the wooden boards, was something small and silver. My keys. I didn't stop to think. I grabbed them, ran to my car, and tore down that dirt road faster than I ever had in my life. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I hit the highway. Only then did I pull over, hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheel. I don't know who or what was out there. I don't want to know. But I do know one thing. I didn't leave that door open. I had been looking forward to this trip for weeks. A solo getaway to a secluded cabin deep in the woods. Just me, the fresh air, and the silence. Work had drained me. Life in the city had become too much, and I needed to disconnect. No emails, no social media, no constant buzzing of notifications. Just me and nature. The cabin was a small wooden structure, nothing fancy, but exactly what I was looking for. It sat at the end of a narrow dirt road, hidden among the thick pines. The nearest town was about 40 minutes away, and even that was just a handful of stores and a gas station. It was perfect. I had stocked up on supplies, food, water, batteries, and plenty of firewood. My plan was to spend the next 5 days out here, away from everything. The first day was peaceful. I spent most of it exploring the area around the cabin, walking through the trees, enjoying the crisp air. There was an old wooden dock by the lake, about a 5-minute walk from the cabin. I sat there for a long time, watching the water ripple, listening to the sounds of the forest. It was exactly what I needed. When the sun started to set, I headed back, made myself a simple dinner, and read for a while by the fireplace. The quiet was nice, almost too quiet. That night, I woke up to a sound outside. It wasn't loud, just the crunch of leaves, like someone walking nearby. I sat up, listening, but the sound was gone. Probably just an animal, a deer or a raccoon. The forest was full of them. Still, I got up, grabbed the flashlight, and shined it through the window. Nothing, just trees and darkness. I shook it off and went back to bed. But sleep didn't come easy after that. The next day, I found footprints near the cabin. Human footprints. They weren't mine. They were slightly larger, deeper, like someone heavier had been walking around. My first thought was that maybe a hiker had wandered through, but I hadn't seen any trails nearby, and these prints were fresh. Too fresh. I tried to brush it off, but something about it unsettled me. The nearest house was miles away, and I hadn't seen a single car on the way up here. Still, I convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe they had been there before I arrived, and I just hadn't noticed. That night, I locked the doors. I double-checked the windows, but sleep was hard to come by. Around 2 in the morning, I heard it again. The crunch of leaves. This time it was closer. Slow, deliberate steps. Not an animal. I held my breath, gripping the flashlight, staring at the window. The footsteps stopped just outside the cabin. Then silence. I stayed frozen, listening, waiting. Nothing. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Finally, I let myself breathe. telling myself it was just my imagination. Morning came, and I stepped outside, my heart pounding. The footprints were there, clear as day. They led from the trees to my cabin, stopping just outside the door. They didn't go anywhere else. Whoever had been there had stood at my door, in the dead of night, listening. I should have left. Any sane person would have. But I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was just a hunter passing through. Maybe they hadn't realized someone was staying here. I decided to stay. I told myself I was being paranoid. The third night was worse. I barely slept. Every sound made my heart race. Around 3 in the morning, I heard something new. Breathing, just outside my bedroom window. Slow, heavy breathing. I didn't move. I barely even breathed myself. The sound stayed for what felt like forever. Then a soft tap. Just once. A single, deliberate tap on the glass. I grabbed my flashlight and turned it on, shining it straight at the window. Nothing. Just the reflection of my own terrified face. I didn't sleep after that. By the morning, I had made up my mind. I was leaving. I packed up my things, threw everything into the truck, and got ready to go. That's when I noticed it. The cabin door was open, just slightly. I knew I had locked it. My stomach dropped. Slowly, I pushed it open, my hands shaking. Inside, nothing looked disturbed. But then I saw the footprints. They were inside now, leading from the door to my bed, and back out again. I left everything behind. My bags, my food, everything. I ran to the truck, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Just for a second, I thought I saw movement by the trees. A shadow. Someone standing there watching me. But I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. I drove straight back to town and didn't look back. I never went back for my things. I didn't even call the owner to tell them I was leaving early. I just left. Whatever was out there, whatever had been watching me, I wasn't going to stick around to find out why. That trip was supposed to be a peaceful escape. Instead, it became a nightmare. I still think about it sometimes. About the footprints. About the breathing outside my window. About the feeling of being watched. And I wonder what would have happened if I had stayed just one more night.